come by, let me feel it, 'cause you want my love.
We have 2 viewers. Hi.
That was good fun.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, y'all.
Hey, Pastor Garrett.
Hey, Steven. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thursday Night Live. Here we
Thursday
go.
Night Live. Welcome.
Yeah.
Right. We have a little intro edit that started there. If you guys saw it, there's at least 2 people online. It was maybe a little laggy, just our internet, but it's a work in progress, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. Welcome to Thursday Night Live. If you guys have a question or a comment about what's going on here at CLC, or for myself or Pastor Garrett, go ahead, drop them, and we're looking.
Please do.
How you been?
Good. Yeah. I'm in the middle of sermon writing right now for this weekend. So, which means my head is not here.
Yeah, right.
It's like over there in my computer.
Right. I did not prep you for this at all. We just talked about what we were going to talk about. We do talk about that. We don't go into super detail, but I'm just going to ask you, where do you start?
Oh man. Where do I start? A better question. So when do I start? It would be like, typically, I mean, I know what passage is coming all along, but typically on Sunday afternoon, I start thinking like about the passage itself, just kind of reflecting on the passage and
prayer.
Yeah, and trying to understand what it's saying, right?
Yeah. That takes enough time.
It does. So my goal always is like by really like midday Monday, I have like a basic idea of like what the passage is saying, and yeah. It's funny. I've been asked like when I write sermons, do I research for them?
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is I tend to not research like, okay, this week I'm preaching on this text, and therefore I'm going to research about this text.
Right.
I tend to not do that.
Mm-hmm.
I just tend to read generally,
like
all the time,
and
kind of like tuck things away, like, oh, this applies to that. And so when I get to the passage itself, I usually can kind of unpack some things. That's not to say that I don't get stuck sometimes. But yeah, so that's my general tack.
That's cool. Yeah.
I'm a reader in general.
Yeah. You can tell you're always pulling out a book here or there, a quote or a thought from someone. I love it. It's so much fun. Just, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I think Pastor Joe is very much the same way. I know he would. He's a constant reader. Pastor Mike as well, but I know Pastor Joe would definitely be like chunking things. Oh, this would be good over here, and so he'd throw it over here or something like that.
Yep.
It's good. Cool.
Yeah, it's helpful. I tend to remember things visually more than what would you say, orally?
Okay.
Audibly or mouth? Audibly.
Audibly, yeah.
I'm clearly tired.
No, it's fine. No, I probably wouldn't even have said it.
Like I'm thinking orally, like speaking, but
orally and went on. I wouldn't have thought about audible.
But I'm a visual learner.
Okay.
So if I read something, I tend to remember it.
Okay.
But if I hear it, exactly. So. Which makes for great conversation at home, right? When you're,
I don't know. I have a great life. No,
like I don't remember you telling me that.
Right. Write it down on the refrigerator or something like that.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Well, cool.
I guess we could skip ahead if we want to talk about the sermon right now, but before we do that, we've got just reminders about our community life here at CLC. Right?
Yeah, we got a big one starting next week, a week from yesterday, actually. What's the date? Think about that. That's the 16th.
Yes.
Because yesterday was the 9th. So the 16th of September, we're starting back for just in a small way, CLC midweek.
Yeah.
So for young families in particular, we want to get those kids out so they can get like in-person instruction and just a chance to be outside together and have a meal together. We think is really important. Next week that starts CLC midweek at 5:00 with a meal, and then 6:00 we've got 3 things going on. 4 if I add the nursery, actually. So
that's true.
Yeah, the nursery's going to be open. But the 3 things that are like programmed, right, would be K through 6 is doing Campers of the Kingdom. 7th and 8th. So Campers of the Kingdom with Esther. 7th and 8th. Steven teaching confirmation. So if you have 7th and 8th graders, like
we've got to talk to you about this. We'll talk afterwards. I think we're going to cover the Apostles' Creed over this time. Really dig into the Creed, our confirmation. Start there. Which I'm excited about.
That is really good stuff. Yeah. I always read the Apostles' Creed as like, it's essentially the Bible in small form.
Right there.
It just condenses everything, who God is and what he does, which the whole scriptures are really talking about that. So, good stuff. So that's 7th and 8th grade.
Cool.
And then And then the parents of all those kids will be with me doing 7 Principles That Make Marriage Work. It's a book by John Gottman.
Yep.
So we're going to read that together and look through the principles themselves and just discuss those. So
that's awesome.
So that's 6 to 7.
6 to 7, yep. And it will be outside, socially distant.
Yep. Meal is outside on the patio between the fellowship center and sanctuary. And then the parents will stay there, and then the kids will split off, but also outside.
Yeah. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited for him to kind of be able to see what we it's not exactly what we do on Wednesday nights in the past, but it's us as a church coming back to some piece of normalcy.
Right.
And so it's exciting for you to be able to jump in and build those relationships.
Yeah.
That you only got 5 weeks in the past 2 weeks too. But,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to another thing, right? CLC Outdoors.
Yeah.
CLC Outdoors.
Some of you braved the heat.
Awesome. Thank you.
This past Sunday, which it felt weird out there with the weather. It was like, where do we live?
Right.
With like the smoke.
Why did I move here?
I wasn't thinking that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I certainly did. The very first fire I experienced here in California was in July, and it was the sand fire. And it was huge. And I remember seeing like across the valley, it all lit up. And I remember waking up and there being smoke falling on my car and it being 105, 106 and it smelling like smoke. And I'm like, I moved to Hades.
Right,
you know? It's like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
But that's great. You grew up here, so you knew about it.
I did, but it's weird. Maybe some of you would feel differently. I feel like they've gotten worse.
Right.
I don't remember them starting this early. I remember having fires as a kid growing up here. But I don't remember them being this like prevalent,
I think I've heard
where
that,
it feels like the whole state is on fire.
Right,
and, not back then. I mean, we had fires, but
I feel like I've heard that from the folks that have been around here a lot longer than myself, right? That it's gotten worse. I even think that over the past 4.5 years, the past 2 years, it feels like the whole state's on fire, which the first 2 years it didn't feel like California is on fire. So
I remember a couple of years ago, this is when we were still living out in Pittsburgh, and we were watching the news, like the nightly news, and it was footage from LA.
Right.
And I want to say it was like the Sepulveda Pass or something like that. It was somewhere on one of the freeways here, maybe the 405. But it's an early morning commute, so it's still dark out.
Right.
But people are driving through, and it's just fire everywhere. It's such a wild shot.
Right. It was all over. I remember
it doesn't even look real.
It's crazy. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Seriously.
But don't leave.
Yeah, don't leave.
You have all these people like, I'm leaving California. Like, why?
Yeah, I know. There seems to be
I know why, but don't.
It's so expensive, and there's fires and there's earthquakes. I mean, but there's a great ocean.
But it's still California. I mean,
yeah, exactly. It's still California. Yeah. And it's a great place to be.
It is.
And I'm sure you feel blessed to be here.
Yeah.
So do I.
I totally do.
So.
I feel like it's a neat place. It's unique. And I think growing up here, I always thought like everywhere is like this.
Oh, no.
And it's not.
Growing up in Michigan, like California, at least in my head, was like this. Oh, it's just the coolest place to be in the world.
Yeah.
I'll never live there. Like that type of stuff. But
see, I thought I wanted to move to Iowa when I was a kid.
That's right. You said that this week.
That's where my dad was from. I was like,
I
want to be a farmer. I want to live in Iowa and, work the land.
Right. And, have a cornfield.
Yeah. It seemed like a happy contrast to like my life here.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I lived out in Iowa for 4 years. And nothing against Iowa. I think it's a beautiful state. But,
it's gorgeous.
But winter. It's just,
that does it.
When I haven't grown up with winter, it's.
Yeah.
So.
We live in a place where you could wear shorts almost all year. Iowa's a little of a shell shock.
Yeah. So CLC Outdoors.
Yeah. So CLC Outdoors.
Come back to that. It's been great.
It was great. Yes.
It really has. It's been a good time together. And this past Sunday we had the 2 worship teams.
Yeah. It was awesome.
From the 2 early services, and then the 11 o'clock service joined together for a song at the end.
It's so cool.
Just good stuff, and just that in and of itself, in my mind, just communicates the unity of the church,
right?
Even in just like a visual, symbolic way,
of like,
course. We are one church, and we're like going through this time together. And there's a sense of encouragement in that,
right?
So it's been good.
Yeah, And each week, your reflections that you've shared, I know they've landed very well.
Oh man.
And so it's been good for me. And,
yeah, truth be told, so this past Sunday, I got up there and I felt like I was having like a heat stroke. I'm like, I can't even think straight. Where's my mind right now? So
but it was good. The Lord worked.
Good.
Did it. So that's cool.
Yeah.
This week, Sunday evening, 6:30 p.m. No food truck this week, but that's fine. It's community
outdoor
and communion.
worship. The weather will be better. It's
right. Yeah, it'll be nice.
And truth be told, I mean, there's nothing to stop anyone from showing up early with dinner in hand and eating in the parking lot. If you guys want to hang out beforehand,
the band is
they're rehearsing, and I've actually seen people who are walking by, who would just like stop and listen. And so if you want to come early, I'm there early. I'm sitting out there and usually listening to the band. Just it's beautiful.
It's a great time to eat or hang out and pray or even catch up with somebody. You could coordinate family, friends, or invite a friend too. That's awesome. So those two big things, right? CLC midweek starting next week for the next 7 weeks.
That's right. It goes up through the end of October.
Yeah.
And then CLC Outdoors goes up through November 1st. Is what we have that plan through. Yeah. Ends on All Saints Sunday, which is First Communion also.
That's right.
For a lot of our fifth graders in particular.
The plan is to be doing it right out there.
To do it out there. And I think it'll just be so cool.
It'll be awesome.
Yeah. If only because why did we create that service?
Right.
It was so we could receive communion. And so in my mind, for the fifth graders to receive communion at a service that was specifically created for that purpose,
it's pretty awesome.
It's just like they are, I hope that we make it a really meaningful, it's a meaningful night regardless, right?
Yes.
But we want to communicate that in the way that we do the service. So
we've got Nanook saying hi to us.
Nanook,
hey. Again. Hey, be nice. Thank you. Always a good reminder for these two mean people here. We love you, Nanook. Miss you. See you soon.
Agreed.
And once again, if you guys have a question or a thought or no CLC swag this week, go ahead.
That really stole the conversation.
Right? I know. Drop that below. This week, I preached last week. And this week though, we are turning toward sort of a new series, following along a series, but also it's like they're also hard to probably connect super together too. But sort of parables, right? And
the only thing they have in common is their parables.
They're parables. So from Jesus, of course. Yeah,
that's another thing in common,
right?
I mean, I guess there are a lot of things in common, but
it's in Israel. No,
they're like different thematically, like different themes each week. So.
What are we looking at this week? Where are we headed in the next few weeks, maybe too?
So this week builds off of your message from last week. It's actually the passage, like Jesus is just still talking, right?
Right.
It just picks up at the same verse that we left off at. So last week, if you guys were with us, it was about kind of, I guess, Christian confrontation, you could say, but
community.
But
it's a ball of yarn,
resolving,
in my opinion.
That's what he thinks. No,
not a neat ball of yarn, a messy one. Okay, good.
But that was about resolving issues for the sake of harmony within the community, right? Going out, and the lost sheep comes right before that,
right? Yeah,
and ensuring that things are dealt with in a way that preserves the integrity of the church, and the unity of relationship. Right. So this week is actually talking about a refusal to forgive, right? Yeah. So it's this parable about the unforgiving servant is the phrase. Where like Peter, it starts off like Peter asks the question like how many times should I forgive my brother? Yeah. And he goes, as many as 7 times. And what's fascinating about that, like I was actually researching for this. I just said I don't do research, but I do research. And apparently the teaching at the time is like Old Testament based on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. Yeah. And so the thought of a lot of rabbis at the time was, if someone does something 2 to especially 3 times, that's indicative of their character. And after 3 times, you cut them off, right? Yeah. And so Peter's statement, we tend to think like, oh man, like he's trying to put limits on forgiveness. In reality, what Peter is saying is like, should I do like 7? And 7 in the Bible is completion, right? It's the 7 days of creation. It's like, should I forgive like as much as, I'm imagining this just full-hearted forgiveness. Right. And what Christ says, like, no. What Peter imagines to be like this very forgiving attitude, just pales in comparison to what Jesus is calling him to. It's the 70 times 7, which is symbolic. It's not like that's 490, right?
It's starting
so it's not like
down.
491, you're off. Like that's not what it is. It's symbolic.
Goodbye.
Meaning like however much you think how forgiving you are, right? That it's an infinite forgiveness, attitude of forgiveness to which we are called. So then he launches into this parable, right, of the servant who gets forgiven by his master, this enormous debt. And then he turns around and he has someone who owes him a very small debt and refuses to forgive him. And so it's this sense of like, well, at that point, actually, his forgiveness from the master gets revoked, right? He loses it. And it's getting at, I think, just an existential truth that we experience in our own lives that when we withhold forgiveness from other people, we thereby forfeit forgiveness from God. We let go of it. We actually like shun it from ourselves or push it away from ourselves. I think it's getting at something that's so accurate, but we're kind of reticent in talking about because like we just want to say God is forgiving no matter what. And it's like, well, yes, but we have to lay hold of that forgiveness and it needs to actually flow through us. Out to others. I think God, he forgives us so that we'll know his heart. And that will reflect that towards other people. So that's where I'm at right now.
That's great. There's the sermon. Like I'm kidding.
You don't have to come on Sunday morning.
No, you do. You definitely do. 9:30 a.m.
No,
right here. We're here. And you'll be able to hear it in full. But that is. I think that's particularly like pertinent too in our culture and our time too, with like this idea of forgiveness. And there was a book I read free of charge. I think it was Miroslav Volf. Where he explains forgiveness in there, and it's through Luther, and I forget, and it changed my concept. Like this was right when I began seminary, I had to read it, and it was when I first was like that book helped me for the first time really see it how it's like not my forgiveness to give to you if I'm in the Lord. It's like no, it's God's forgiveness, and how dare you ever hold that back?
We're just communicating what is not ours, actually.
But I mean, it's so hard to apply that to your daily life when it's your brother and sister who's sinned against you, right? But
I shouldn't be laughing, but I am.
It's funny. But it also goes to the length and the depth of the forgiveness of God too, right? But it's his. It's his. And so don't hold it back. It's just
I remember hearing someone, he was talking about, it was at a theological conference that I was listening to this guy talk. He's a patristic scholar. So if you're familiar with it's like early church fathers, like first couple hundred years of the church, they call them church fathers. So patristics is what he studied. And he picked up on the fact that whereas during the Reformation, they focused so much on forgiveness, which is certainly, that's a biblical truth, right? That we're forgiven our sin, that there's grace that comes from God. Anyway, but he says that in the early church, they talked about forgiveness for the sake of union. And they said that the reason God forgives us isn't just so we don't feel guilty. It's more so God forgives us so that we can have union with his heart. And that we can come to know the love that he has for us, and that we can come to be that love in the world if that makes sense. The whole point of forgiveness, and actually if you think about this, I'm just thinking about like in any relationship, when you want forgiveness, it's not just so you can like no longer feel bad about yourself. It's so that you can actually restore the relationship and have union with the person. And I think that's biblical. That God wants to restore the relationship through forgiveness.
I mean,
so that we can have union with his own heart.
It's like the temple, the curtain being torn, right? That barrier, the divide, that direct relationship.
So that's where we're going right now. There's still work.
Of course.
Obviously.
Of course. You have till Sunday morning at 9:30. And it will be live and live stream. There were so many times on Sunday where I wanted to say, like, cut! Like, can I redo this?
I know what you're saying. They're like no retakes, right?
No, it's live.
Which when we first started, maybe you guys didn't know this, but when we started just with videotaping, not live streaming. but there was only one time we redid the announcements a couple times,
Okay.
just because like if it started off kind of like choppy
or something.
it's like early on we're like, okay, let's cut it and start over, right? We don't want the service to start that way. One time we redid the sermon because I remember I gave it and it was just like, this is so sloppy, and like I feel like it's not going to be clearly communicated, so we redid it. But now we don't have that option.
You don't have that option. You just
it's like
you
one
get
take.
up there and you preach, boy.
Yeah. Which is how it is like in person, right?
Right,
So,
it is.
Yeah.
But
It's
it's
a good
not
thing.
on
Keeps us
the
honest.
internet
No.
forever. Yeah, that's great. Oh, we got Jason and Anook talking
right.
back and forth. Good to see the community. All right. That's great. One thing, as we are, one question, and I think we were kind of talking about this before we got on.
Yeah.
It might be something that consistently is brought up on these talks here, and it's just a discussion around like Lutheranism.
Yeah,
we're a Christ Lutheran church. We're a Lutheran church, and and depending on your background and where you come from, that might mean a whole host of different things. And so, not all tonight, not right now necessarily.
I'm just going to explain Lutheranism in 4 consecutive hours.
Here we go, right now. You guys joined. You can't leave. All 14 of you. No, I'm kidding. But it's just maybe something around what we could talk about and just to translate some things and maybe talk about some things because there's just a diversity of opinions.
Right. I remember some of the confirmation kids at the church I was at out in Pittsburgh, they all thought Luther, like Martin, so like Christ Lutheran Church, or we were at Zion Lutheran Church. They thought Lutheran was for Martin Luther King.
Oh, right, yeah.
That we were named after, and they're like, wait a second, that's not the guy? And it's like, no, it's not.
He was named after the original Martin Luther King.
It's just like,
Right.
So, I mean, it's not a bad, association, but
no,
it's just kind of funny. So, but point being, Lutheran, the name Lutheran is like, what does that even mean? Right.
And so tonight, I want to just ask you, how did you get to become a Lutheran pastor? Obviously, there's your faith story and how you were led to the Lord, but specifically, what brought you to the Lutheran tradition?
Right.
Faith?
Oh man. So I came to faith. What was instrumental in that was the ministry of Baptist churches,
right?
In particular, the preaching of Francis Chan was when I first I think I had heard the gospel multiple times before, but that was the first time that the Lord opened my own heart to it, and it sank in. I guess you could say it's kind of like the parable of the different types of soil, and that was the first time in my life that the soil was softened and the seed of God's grace sunk in and started to take root. So that was through Baptist churches, but it was so in my first year of college, I kind of fell apart. Right, it was like this huge transition year of leaving home and leaving friends, and at the same time, my faith kind of crumbled. I'd only been a Christian for a year at the point, and what I struggled with was, at least it was communicated to me in this way. A lot of the theology I was kind of getting was a focus on like, once you're saved, right? And so now we need to focus on other people getting saved, which there's truth to that. I totally get it. But when you read the New Testament, saved gets used in 2 ways, right? One is the event of coming to faith, that like you're saved when you come to faith, when you come to trust Jesus with your life, you're saved. But then there's also you're saved continuously. It's a process, right? Of course. So even in Philippians, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. So it's not a once saved and you're done, but rather a continual conversion that continues your whole life long.
I love that convert. Like I think Oscar Romero, right? I did a deep dive into him during this quarter when I was studying Latin American, which is super interesting, right? But he, in his preaching, he's constantly like talking to his parish. We must be converted, be converted. But he's talking to Christians, right? And that it just jarred me, and it was. Not until I saw that it made me go into this long sort of process of discovering. I like how you put it. These 2 senses of salvation. Coming to faith is crucial, but we miss it so much. Sometimes.
And so I think that actually is somewhat born out of not a particular theology as much as like a revivalist history that American Christianity has.
Oh, okay.
That like there was such an emphasis in these revivals on conversion, coming into faith. And don't get me wrong, I think it's
so important.
It's critical, right? It's like if faith doesn't begin, how's it going to grow, right?
Right.
So that, but again, the beginning is not the end,
right?
And I think that's what kind of was missing for me, and it got brought to a head in this fact that my faith was kind of falling apart. I was backsliding. I was like, what's going on? I don't know. And then I came across, so I started reading a bunch of different people. I read C.S. Lewis, who was an Anglican. Right. I started reading Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was like my first introduction to Lutheranism, but I didn't really know what Lutheranism was. Right. But he kept quoting Luther. Right. And so I was like, I need to read Luther. And I went and read him, and it was the first thing I read.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you read from Luther?
Was actually the 95 Theses, right?
Oh, there we go.
It was like the 95 Theses. This is what started it all. But like the first one, and I still remember, the first one is that when the Lord calls us to repent, he calls for the whole life of a believer to be one of repentance. And so it had that
right there.
Yeah, this ongoing. And I think he just acknowledged one thing, that was Luther was brutally honest about his own experience of the Christian life. Yeah. That it is not a victory march, right? Right. It is one of continual repentance. Yeah. And always confessing and relying on grace, and
drown yourself in your baptism in the morning and wake up anew. Right. It's like every day.
Right. So so that kind of hooked me. Yeah. So I started reading like everything I could from Lutheran theologians. I got a book of Concord. If you haven't read the book of Concord, like please. Yeah. It's like it's just great stuff. That's so faithful to Scripture, right, and so relevant to life at the same time, right? It's always kind of speaking to the life of faith. So I started reading that, and then I was like, I need to find a Lutheran church. Right. So like I started just searching on the internet, like where's a Lutheran church, and I like pulled in here on a Sunday morning just out of nowhere, and pulled into a spot. And what's so funny is I remember pulling into the spot, and like, I don't know about you, so driving to a new church, walking into a new church. Oh yeah. It's kind of intimidating.
That's super intimidating. Like I hope there's no greeters this morning.
Right. Like don't say hi to me. Don't ask me my name. No offense, greeters.
No, yeah.
You're important. Like important. You want to be friendly, right?
I love you.
But it was just kind of like this, and that, I think that's part of why I'm just thinking out loud, but that's why people gravitate towards these mega churches, right? You can be totally anonymous.
Yeah,
you can sneak in the back and like checking this out. But COC is a more medium-sized church. Right. I was coming to 8 a.m. service. It's like, you're most likely gonna like be noticed and going in there. So I was super nervous driving, but I remember pulling in, having this overwhelming sense of peace. And then so I pulled in, had overwhelming sense of peace. And then I received the sacrament. And I had never experienced like this, how the sacrament, how communion is central to the service. And it's a promise of grace. It's not something we're doing, right? It's just, we don't know how we're doing it. We're just doing it as like to remember Jesus. And we are remembering Jesus. But it was this promise of grace now. Right. And this assurance. And I remember pulling in, like going out and walking my car and just having another huge sense of peace. Like, I think what we can fail at in churches is we talk a lot about like God being for you and God being gracious, but it's all talk. Yeah. And then we receive the sacrament, and there's a realism to that, right? There's a concrete. Yeah, it's like okay,
sort of. Yeah.
I know God is for me because He actually gave Himself to me this morning, and I think that. So the Luther's first thesis, and then the celebration of communion, were just kind of like, okay, not leaving.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, not leaving. So that was kind of I guess that was the journey.
That was the hook and the line and the sinker.
Right. Yeah. So what's funny is my first day on staff here, right? Yeah. Get called here, and I drive in, and just like not even thinking, I just pull into the parking lot. I park, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
There's the same exact parking spot.
I was.
Oh my God.
I was in the same exact parking spot. And it was the same sort of thing where I was driving in, I'll be honest, nervous. I pulled into the spot. It was like this sort of like, it's okay, right? It's like this promise of grace I was just reminded of, right? That God is actually in control. He's sovereign over our lives and the way that they're orchestrated. And anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
I can talk all night, but you don't want me to.
So that is so that was the way in which you got brought into the Lutheran faith. Okay. So a sacrament. Big piece.
Yeah, acknowledgement of the need for grace, right? and like this continual conversion, I guess you could say, that we're called to continual conversion, not just one-time conversion, but also continual. But yeah, then the solidity of the sacrament, that you had something solid for your faith to believe in, that you could rest in that. So,
all right,
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
I think that's a great start to this ongoing conversation, because we could talk forever. About Lutheranism. Right.
I'm going to bring a question for you next.
Oh, okay. What? So it's very different. Sorry, I put you on the spot there. I asked that too, because one of the things that I find so awesome is that, because I grew up as a Lutheran, right? And I was like born into it, raised into it, went to Lutheran grade school and preschool and kindergarten, all the way through high school. And so it's just always been there. I've gone a little bit back and forth, when I was in
between like Lutheran and something else.
So college, you could say maybe I was moving more toward like this non-denominational mindset, right? I think a lot of people my age, our age, right, especially those big churches, and they have these great college ministries and things like that on campus. So, but for me, it's sort of what I never felt like I left, or was like never left being a Lutheran or abandoned that. I just felt there was a time where I had a problem with more of like the tradition. I became super contemporary driven, and but then at the end of college, it just was this slow coming back to it all. Because of the sacrament, because of baptism, and just how important that is as an identity marker in reflection and in my walk with Christ as it is, and the understanding of it from a Lutheran perspective versus just like an ordinance theology or non-denominational, and then especially communion. It just felt weird each week when I would take communion. And it wasn't, not that I felt like it just didn't have that same veracity being in a community, at least that at least saw in that manner. And so, but for me though, it's basically been this through line in my life of being a Lutheran. German grandparents that came over, German Lutherans, so so it's so fun. It's so fun to meet you. This odd, because like even when I grew up,
there aren't that many Lutherans who like read their way into Lutheranism, right?
Not in my experience, at least. There's maybe some of you watching, and that would be great. If that's one of you that had like a later coming to Luke, that's not escaped Catholic or something like that. You see a lot of that, right? But and at your age too, like you were younger.
Yeah, my 20s. I was 22.
Yeah, that's just 22. That's what I find so interesting, is that you went toward the Lutheran rather than
the other direction, right?
That's been at least my experience growing up.
Like
going to Lutheran high school, watch my friends, right? You'll see them. It seems more likely like they'd go more toward maybe like a non-denom at this point or something. But it's just
what's funny, Steve and I were talking about this before we started tonight. I think that if you grow up in anything, right? I think there's a tendency, and it doesn't always have to be the case, but there's a tendency to lose curiosity, right? Where you get to the point where like, I know it, right? I know, I went through confirmation. I know the faith. I know what it means to be Lutheran, or I know what it means to be like XYZ, whatever.
The moment you say that.
But I was saying that what's cool is you're still like, even though you grew up in it, there's a curiosity driving you to learn and to grow. And so I think that's where like the tradition, having grown up in it, is so beneficial. I always say when I teach confirmation, like you have no idea what a blessing this is to actually get this grounding.
No, you're right, because it's no matter what, it's like if you're going to be that person that says, I know it after confirmation, it's like, hopefully we communicated justification by faith, right? And it's like, at least you walked away with that as the surface, right? Rather than something where you have to earn or have to, do yourself up to be loved by God. Right. Not it.
Yeah, even sorry, I could just go on this forever.
I know, that's what I'm trying to bring up.
But I'm thinking of like, I had a sense of being called to be a pastor from about when I came to faith, like shortly after coming to faith, my senior year of high school, I had a youth pastor who said, like, kind of planted the seed, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to study in college? And I said, I'm going to study business. And he's like, really? Just gave me a look. I can tell what he was getting at.
Right.
And then he kind of planted the seed. But it didn't make sense to me because, you know, I always, and this isn't always the case, so maybe this is unfair, but I felt like non-denominational pastors were a particular mold that I didn't fit, right?
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
And I felt like when I saw Lutheran pastors, there was a greater variety within it. And it was not so much about the personality of the pastor. Right. It really wasn't. It was about the gospel. And the pastor is just there to point to the gospel and to administer the sacraments. And we put our faith in that, not in the pastor. So I thought that was just, when I started seeing that, I'm like, wait a second. I feel like I'm called to be a pastor and I'm called to be Lutheran. It was like the convergence of the two finally. Right. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. So I'm sure next week we'll find a new topic to go. Daniel Prees has a question about confirmation email. All right, I will, Daniel. I'll shoot you an email tonight. Maybe. Yeah. It's not too late. Hi, Nancy. And that's who's checked with them.
Yeah. Thanks for your comments, guys. It's good to know that you're watching, and like
totally.
We otherwise just see like so many people, like 11 people are watching, right? Just I think the current number, but it's good to see names so we know.
Just so we know who's there. It's great.
Let us know. And
we miss you guys.
Yeah, totally.
And
look forward to seeing you guys and being back. I feel like the numbers for COVID-19 are tapering.
A little bit.
And so it's somewhat promising that we can,
hopefully soon,
at least a slow return, to some more meeting in person. We have meeting in person, but more would be good. So
cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Waving. Yeah, Nancy. All right. Well, do you have anything else that you want to share with the community, the group, our folks?
Yeah, just thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing you guys on Sunday night for CLC Outdoors.
Gwen Merrill wants to say hi. Hi, Gwen.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Almost before we left.
Good fun.
Yeah, but thank you. Right. Thank you, guys. I think that's a big thank you. Right.
Yeah.
During this, our congregation is just awesome. I think.
Yeah.
Right. They just have been so willing and
ready.
Like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah. The support has been. You guys have the support of this congregation has been amazing.
Awesome.
Through what's on top of COVID-19, right? I'm not being able to meet together. And then you have a new pastor that
I'll just say. Can I say it this way?
So
you can tell me if I'm wrong. I haven't been here that long, but I would say that CLC has gone through its biggest leadership change ever.
Right.
In the midst of a pandemic.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
On top of crazy.
Yeah.
We had two pastors, Pastor Joe's 25 years, and Pastor Mike 13 years, long-term stay pastors.
Yep.
And both obviously being called elsewhere, called in retirement, and moving. Right.
Right.
It's just been crazy.
Huge change.
But this congregation is awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I remember the first weekend we met back together. I think it was on a Thursday night service. I a little bit referenced the nature of how much has changed.
Right.
But for whatever reason, the verse that kept popping to mind was Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Yeah.
And that's true of the church, right? That's what we stand on as our foundation is that there's a lot of change in the world and in this life in general, but Jesus doesn't change. And that he's consistently there and always leading, and that's something that we can actually rest in. So, and I think that the support of the congregation conveys that where our faith is in that, right?
Yeah.
So it's been really encouraging.
I think that's what we should end on. I don't want to get it because that's good. Leave with that note of encouragement. Jesus Christ is the same as yesterday and forever.
Yeah.
And so is the church. That's awesome.
Well, hey. Yeah.
That's great.
Thanks, Steven.
Thanks.
And
thanks, Will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Will.
Our camera guy. Always see him around. Make sure you give him thank you. Our live
drag him onto the camera.
Right, we will. One of these days we'll roll that chair over here. All right. We hope that you guys just have a great week, blessed week. We can't wait to see you. If you have any questions, reach out. Daniel, I'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.